my name is Sana Taimisto, and I work here at Robocorp as a customer success lead. And my background is in RPA. I worked 2 years as an RPA consultant, building automations for customers. And now I have been working here at Robocorp for almost 1 year.
I'm Wikström. I've been with Robocorp for soon a year. Currently working as a customer success manager, but I've been working in various roles. My background is not in RPA. My background is more in test automation and the software development lifecycle.
Our use case is called weekly sales report creation. And if we quickly go through the systems involved in this process, they are Excel, and then a company intranet, which is actually Robocorp's test system. So this is our learning target application, and also Microsoft Word. And the very high level process flow is described here. Here we have a very typical use case for RPA automations. So our robot has to first download an Excel spreadsheet with all the sales data, then log into the company intranet, which is the test system we have built for learning purposes. Then we need to select the first row from the Excel spreadsheet and fill the information for one sales rep using the form on the intranet. And then we need to submit the form. And then we need to loop these 3 steps for all the rows in the Excel spreadsheet. And the last step in the process is to create a PDF report from the sales results.
Sounds good.
Yep. And now, as an RPA developer, I would like to get started building the robot. So from the detailed steps, I see that my first step is to download an Excel file. And it's actually, it's showing how the Excel file looks like, but it's not actually showing the URL here. So I have the URL for the sales data here. Sorry, I need to, so it's actually this one. And I can see that it downloads the URL if I use this. It downloads the Excel file if I use this URL. So I will now go to our Robocorp lab and start building the robot. This is our landing page for Robocorp Lab, our developer tool. If I wanted to create a new robot, I would click here. But in this case, I have already written down some tasks for the robot to this file. I will navigate to the tasks.robot, which is our robot file. So this is where we built the robot itself. And here we can see that we have 2 sections in this robot already. So now we have the settings cell and also the tasks cell field. And if we look at this tasks cell, we can see that I have already written down here the steps that we want the robot to complete. So they are the very same steps we had in the PDD. So download the sales spreadsheet, open the intranet website, log in to company intranet, and so on. So I will go back to the first step that I wanted to perform, and it was downloading the sales spreadsheet. So if I want to download an Excel file from an URL, I will need a library to do this. And also in libraries, we have keywords. And keywords are these ready-built building blocks that we can use we can reuse them in all the robots that we build. And in this way, we don't need to build everything from scratch. So they are a great way to get started with building the robot. And here we have a new feature called Keywords Explorer. It's actually still in beta, so there will be improvements coming, but I can already show you how it works. So my first step was to download the sales spreadsheet. So I will write download here. And from the URL, I saw that I will share you the URL. So here we will need the HTTP library, which we can see here. And also we have a keyword called download. So I will click this one and see how this looks like. So this documentation tells us a little bit about the keyword itself and also arguments that we can use with the keyword. So now I have found a library that I want to use. It's called RPA.http, and also a keyword that I want to use. It's called download. So I will close this Explorer for a while and I will write the library here. So it was RPA.http. And after this, I need to create a section or a cell for the keywords. And the keyword, I will name it download the sales spreadsheet, so the robot will know which step to perform first. And the keyword I wanted to use was called download. I can also use the autocomplete here. So this is our small building block that we will use to download the Excel file from the URL. And it tells me that I need to give it an URL where to find the Excel. So I will copy paste this URL from here and write it here. And now we have the first step ready, and we should be able to test this. And I run these cells and now I will check if it works. Okay, I was able to get the sales data here. So this was a successful keyword. Now I can move to the next step. So that is opening the intranet website. So I will again go to the Keyword Explorer. And when I want to open a website, I need to do something with the browser. So that is my target application. So I will write browser here. And as you can see, we have many keywords to work with the browser here. For example, switch browser, close all browsers, and so on. And now I wanted to open a browser. And we actually have many keywords for this one as well. So just open browser, open user browser, and so on. In this case, I happen to know that this open available browser is a very good one because it opens the first available browser in the system in preferred order. So I will go with this library and this keyword from the library. So again, I will need to write the library here. And also to use the keyword, I will add a keyword section here. I will name the keyword with this name so that the robot again knows what to do with it. And I will use the autocomplete again. So now I have the second keyword here, and it's again telling me that it needs an URL where to navigate to. And we have the URL here on the PDD. It's written here. So I will copy this URL and write it here. And again, we can test if this works. So first we need to run the settings cell, and then we can check if this keyword works. Okay, looks like we were able to navigate to the website that we wanted to. The next thing we want to do is actually make these URLs reusable. So I will create a variable file so that we don't need to every time write these URLs to the robot code, but we can use the variables that we give to them. So for the intranet URL that we are using here, I will give it the name intranet URL. And let's put it here. And we will also need one for sales data URL. And we will take this URL from here. Okay, so now we have variables in place. And let's just save these. And actually, before testing, I need to delete this sales data Excel file from here. And I also need to add the variables file here so the robot knows that it can use it. And of course, I need to replace these URLs with the variable names. So I will write here sales data URL. And here what did we have? Intranet URL. Okay, and now let's see if these work. Okay, that one did. Okay, and we were also able to open the intranet logging page with this variable. So now we can actually reuse these URLs later in the process if we need it. So we have now completed 2 steps from the process. And as we can see from here, the next step is to log into the intranet. So I will start with this keyword as well. So again, I will create a keyword section and I will name it to log in to company intranet. And this time I won't go to the keyword explorer because I'm assuming that in RPA browser library, we have some keywords for writing text to a text field. So I will test if we have some keywords for this. Okay, now it worked. So I started writing text here, and now I can see all the keywords that include these letters from these RPA HTTP and RPA browser libraries. And if I look at these keywords, we have one for input text. So that sounds like a keyword that I would need. So I will try with that one. And it's telling me that the arguments that it needs are called locator and text. The locator is, of course, the robot needs some way to identify which field it has to input the text to. So I will check the ID for this text field, and we do happen to have an ID called username here. So I will write ID username here. And of course, we also need to tell it which username to use. So here, actually, on the login page, we are telling the user that you can log in using Maria as a username. So we could write this Maria to the code itself here to the text field or the text locator. No, sorry, to the text argument. But actually, this is not a best practice because we don't want to write the username and passwords to the code itself. So actually now I will stop sharing this robot and Tim will share his robot and show you how to write sensible information, or how the robot can use sensible information without writing it to the code itself.
So picking up from where Sana left off, we have a keyword to log into the company intranet. We have populated it with a locator, and we did the same for the password field. But what we don't want to do is to write the usernames and passwords in the implementation, as that's very bad practice, and we want to keep these out from the robot implementation files and out of version control and these kinds of things. So instead, I want to use variables, and let's enter the password here. And then what we do here is we will use a library called secrets. Now we are in Python world, whereas this was in robot framework. So we are using Python notation like this to import the secrets library. And we will instantiate it. And then what we do here is we are assigning to the username variable and to the password variable values that we can find from my local equivalent to the vault we have in the cloud. And in my local secret storage, I have something called spare bin credentials. I'm referring to that element and its sub-element called username and password. The nice thing about this is that when I'm running this robot locally, it will fetch this from my local storage. But once I upload this to Robocorp Cloud, when I'm done with my process, it will use the vault inside Robocorp Cloud. So it's really transparent and easy for the developer to iterate and maintain. All right, so now we have a username and a password. And words in here, that's good. So let's go ahead and do a test run. Okay, now we have a username and a password, but we didn't click anything yet. I'll just verify manually that it works. It did. And now we are kind of at the heart of the system for this particular robot. But I'll just finalize this previous keyword by making it actually submit the form as well. And that's a typical action you can take to click buttons after you enter field contents. You could also say perhaps like click button, submit, but either works. I prefer this one for now. Just rerunning it. And we are in. All right, let's take out this PDD. So now we have completed the download part. We have logged in. And now we get to the part that looks like a loop here. What it says is that employee selects the next row to process from the spreadsheet. Then the employee fills the information related to one sales representative using the form. So this same form we had here. And then employee submits the form, sees the information added to the table, and then goes to a decision. Are there more rows to insert? If yes, then we'll continue doing the same thing until finally we have iterated every single row. And then we want to create a report of the total sales and store the output of the PDF. Well, how I'm going to approach this now is I'm going to do the central part of the loop once. So I'll feed it for one sales representative first, and then we create a loop around it to achieve this flow here. So let's start with a new keyword. Keywords. And what we'll do is enter one sales rep. That should be descriptive. And add it as part of our flow here as well. And as we see here, we are again in a situation where we want to feed information into into text fields. So we'll do the same thing as before. Input and autocomplete. There it is. And I'll do it for 3 fields now. Like so. First we wanted the first name, then the last name. I'll skip the sales target for now because it's a drop down. We'll tackle that afterwards. And then we have the sales result. How much has a sales representative sold during the period? So I'll just start by filling values for this kind of 1% test run we are performing. Now I've been very busy, so I've been selling for 100,000. And now what we could do is use the same approach to these IDs that we did before, but because I think many people know who work with locators, these can get tricky quite fast. So what I do instead is I'll use the UI locators functionality here on the sidebar, top right. And I already pre-created IDs for these fields, but I'll just quickly show you how it works. So this will be an example. You give it a name, and at the most basic, you can just start a new browser, which you can then direct to whatever you want. And then you click locate, after which you're able to then pinpoint to the element you want. I want, let's say I want a Google search button here. Then it will store the value here for the locator, and we'll finally click add. And now I have a locator called example, which I can use anywhere in my robot. So that's the basic flow for creating the locators. But for now, I'll be content with just reusing what I already did in similar fashion. The way I'm referring to this is by alias. So there's first name, then there's alias last name, and finally there's alias sales result. All right, rerunning this. And this is a very typical thing you will see when building robots. So nothing happened here, and the typical flow is that the way the robot executing this script and this process, it's working faster than the browser it's instructing. So good practice here would be to, let's close the locator stuff here. Before we attempt to enter any sales information, we'll have add a keyword here called wait until element is visible. And again, a locator. But because we are going to next interact with the first name field, we'll just wait for it to be visible. And that's typically enough to kind of control the flow according to your needs. Okay, so now we have a field form here. All right, that's one step closer. And now we're just missing the loop aspect and creating the summary here. I'll jump a bit forward in time now. I'll open another robot which is more fleshed out, so we are not implementing every single step, but I'll walk you through how to achieve the final parts as well. Let's put this side by side. So this is not a full implementation. We have the settings section as before, describing the robot, describing the necessary libraries we need here, importing variables. And then one thing I added, which is basically a thing that cleans up the state after the robot has run, which is good practice so that you know that you are getting kind of a known state and are resetting the state after your run. But then after that, we have the individual keywords here, like in the flow, and we can just skim them through from the top one by one. So we have the download sales spreadsheet we looked at. We have the open the internet website one. We have a login to company internet. And then we get to the loop. We have the loop here. So I'm calling this fill the form using the data from the Excel file. And now I guess this is a kind of a key difference now that I'm writing a robot. I'm not instructing a human anymore. So instead of creating a loop where one row is read from a spreadsheet every loop, I can instead open the workbook and read the whole contents of the workbook into a variable again. And then I'm just closing the workbook. And at this point, all the rows from the Excel file are in this variable. And then what I can do is create the loop itself. It's here defined by the words for and end. And what we are looping over is the contents we just created. So it's a list of sales representative data, complete list where every single element is of the first name, last name, sales target, and sales results. And what this loop does is it assigns into this variable one by one the rows as we iterate. And then inside the loop, we are calling another keyword which actually does the job itself. I'm calling it fill and submit the form for one sales representative. And I'm giving it the loop variable here. And then when we look into that implementation, right above here, it's pretty much the same thing we just built before I open this full implementation. The only difference here is that we are now referring to table rows. So this is one row as said, and into the first name field, we want to enter the value from the row, which is in the column called first name. And similarly for last name, and then for sales. The only difference here is the sales target, which is not free text field, but a drop-down list. So because our Excel contains numeric values, we want to convert it to a string of characters so that we can actually then use a pre-made keyword called select from list by value. And then we filled in all the values, and then we submit the button, submit the form. So that's the heart of the loop, going through the Excel one by one. And finally, when the last row has been read, we are exiting by the no clause here. Then we want to take the results from the summary that's on the internet page, right next to where we fill the data. So what I'll do now is I'll run this manually first, cell by cell, just like we've been doing so far as well. And now the robot starts executing from scratch. And this right-hand side here is the summary we want to store at the end, after every single sales rep has been entered here. Our example company has a workforce of 50 people, so we are getting towards the end of this run here, after which we can take a brief look at the log and the output file. Right, and then as the very final step in this robot, we want to create the report from the page where we enter the sales data. And we have here a keyword called, as the final step, create sales summary. What it does is it waits until the sales report is visible. Well, it typically is there once we enter the first one, so that's kind of a no-brainer. But the thing we do next here is we capture part of a web page based again on an locator I won't go into details of this one. You can read more in the show notes. There's a quick start guide. It explains in detail how exactly we capture that part of the page, but that's a bit more detailed. So, but anyway, we store part of the web page as plain HTML in this variable, and then we use another keyword called HTML to PDF. We throw the same HTML to it, and we tell it where to write the report, the PDF. And that's something I also declared here in the variables. But now let's go for a full run of this robot, just as it would run on Robocorp Cloud. And then we'll look at the results. This is the Excel we are entering into our intranet in this robot. We are iterating over an Excel with 4 columns, and in this case it has 51 rows. First name, last name, sales, results, and sales target. All right. And now when I'm quite confident that we have a working implementation, I can just click Run Robot. All of these files will be packaged to one, and it will be run just as in Robocorp Cloud. And now it's processing this Excel, 1 row at a time, filling in these details, submitting. Up to 51 rows. Actually 50 rows because we have 1 header. Yeah, that's it. Now we get a status indicator that the robot run has passed. We could look at the log. This is typically something you want to do if things aren't working as you hoped. Can get into really the details of what exactly is taking place and how long it took, and so on. Really helpful. But now I told the robot to write the PDF to this place, report location. And where you find it nowadays, this is a very recent change to Robocorp Lab, is that we have inside here we have a folder called test run, which will create a new subfolder for every single time you run the robot. And inside that, I've defined to have an output folder, and inside that, the sales results PDF. And now this is now the kind of captured part from the web page, converted from HTML to PDF. And now at this stage, once my robot is complete, what I would do next is I would publish it to Robocorp Cloud. But that's something that our colleague will tell you more about in the next episode.